that I didn't lose that.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Leti Terrones. I'm a librarian at Cal State L.A. And I am I'm the librarian that sends you emails regarding Library Live, like today's workshop on reading skills for college. And I'm also the librarian that sends you the emails regarding Meditation Mondays, which has been really cool. Many students attend that program, Meditation Mondays, on Zoom and in person. So I want to tell you that I'm that person that sends you the emails so you can put a face to the emails. And today I'm so pleased to have Iris Aceves, the director for the Center for Academic Success. Iris is a wonderful colleague that I'm very blessed to have here at Cal State LA. And she is here to present a fantastic workshop on how to read critically and efficiently and effectively so that you're able to get through your course readings and also be able to sharpen up your critique of the course readings. So I wanted to also just make a plug for the Center for Academic Success. I'm going to put the link to the Center for Academic Success in the chat. And at the Academic Success, you can get writing tutoring. You can also get sort of tutoring in general, but also for all the STEM majors, we have, or the Center for Academic Success provides some really excellent targeted tutoring for the STEM majors. So without further ado, I want to introduce Iris, and then as you're sharing your screen, Iris, I want to also just invite all the students, if you have a specific question that you want to ask about, how to handle your course readings, how to not to feel swamped by them, how to read effectively, any question like that that you might have, please feel free to drop it in the chat. You can chat me directly. You can chat Iris directly, or you could send it to the entire crew that's here today. Thank you.
Great,
Iris?
thank you. Thank you, Letty. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So, as Letty mentioned, I am the director for the Center for Academic Success. The Center for Academic Success is your place. If you are taking any pre-calculus math courses, we have group tutoring just for you. If you are taking a mechanical engineering class, biology, chemistry, anatomy, physiology, we have, as Letty mentioned, STEM specific tutors for you. And we have wonderful writing tutors that are available to help you at any point along the writing process for papers that you have to submit for class, but also for personal statements, perhaps that you're wanting to write because you're applying to a scholarship or because you're applying to a graduate program or a PhD program, as you move along and progress your transition here at Cal State L.A. from being an undergraduate student to a grad student to a PhD candidate. So we can help you at the writing wing of the Center for Academic Success. We can help you along those lines when you're preparing your personal statement. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to go ahead and have a conversation about reading. And one of the reasons that I'm hosting this presentation with Letty is that reading is crucial to the writing process as well, right? So I'm going to share my screen. There will be opportunities for us to use the chat feature or the thumbs up feature that you have on Zoom for us to interact. I'll give you a lot of information. I'll give you 6 strategies or 6 tips to become a more effective reader. And then we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. So let me go ahead and begin without further ado by sharing my screen. Okay, so can folks with an emoji feature, a thumbs up? Okay, great. I'm seeing a thumbs up. Thank you, Letty. Um, you're able to see my screen. Once again, Letty is recording this video. Currently, we have a version of this video on the Library Live's YouTube page, but we will be recording and uploading this version that you're currently in at a later time this semester. So welcome folks to Reading Skills for College. This presentation was created a couple of years ago, actually I think longer than that now at this point, and it was created by the Center for Academic Success and the University Library. We are seeing a need for reading skills. Reading skills are going to be very helpful for you when you're writing a paper in your class. They're going to be also potentially even very helpful for you as you're reading for things in the STEM field as well. Reading is an important part of your college life. During this presentation, we're going to discuss a little bit of the following. We're going to talk a little tiny bit about reading and memory. We're going to talk about linear reading versus predatory reading. And we're going to go over 6 tips for becoming a predatory reader. And those will be in no particular order: finding the thesis by observing word choice, picking and choosing the most important part in a reading, changing your reading speed, annotating, otherwise known as taking notes, creating a concept map, and making meaning from the reading. So we're going to go ahead and do these 3 things during this hour that we have together. We will finalize with a Q&A at the end, and we always have time for that. So first little bit of interaction to make sure that I haven't lost anyone along the way is using the thumbs up feature. Have you ever read an article or a chapter for homework and forgotten what it says in a couple of hours? Okay, so I'm seeing a nod from Letty. Amber, I'm seeing a thumbs up. Walter is like, yes, I'm here. And I know, Walter, you and I have had a conversation about this. Kendra, thank you for the thumbs up. And just Jaswanth, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, and Mayashiro, thank you for the thumbs up. For folks who I haven't, whose thumbs up disappeared, before I got to see you, thank you so much. This happens, and the reason that we're asking that question at the very beginning is because I want to acknowledge that we're spending a lot of hours reading, and then we're forgetting our readings, and this is completely normal. So a lot of this conversation is coming from a book that we were reading. You're going to be yes. So it's the transition for college writing, and you can see. Oh no, yes, no, no, I don't. The YouTubers make this look so much easier. So there is a physical book out in the universe called The Transition for College Writing. And one of the first things that they mention in this book is that it's 100% normal for us to read something or go to class, and then for us to forget it right after class, right? And so here, one of the quotes that I like to pull out is that our memory will deteriorate more gradually to about 30% after 9 hours and about 20% after a week. So if we learn something week 2 of the semester and we have a midterm next week, which is week 8, we've already forgotten a lot of things. This is completely normal. And Keith Yortzhoy emphasizes that if you're tired or stressed, you haven't gotten enough sleep, or felt nourished, that you're going to remember even less if you are already tired and distracted. So that's why part of a very healthy lifestyle as a college student is actually to sleep and to exercise and to eat well, along with reading your assignments for class. So now that we've established that reading is something that we're doing, but that forgetting reading is also something very normal, let's talk a little bit about another concept that Keith Yortzhoy talks about, which is called linear reading. So this will be another opportunity for us to use the chat, or for us to go ahead and use an emoji feature. So we have an image here. and it's of a young person. She's on a hammock, she's reading a book. You know, what are some adjectives that we could use about this person in this image reading this book? So I'm going to go ahead and open up the chat. So folks, feel free to, okay, Pamela's mentioning she's relaxed. She has no problems. There's not a care in the world. Karina's mentioning that she's very serene, right? Amber's mentioning she's very peaceful. Okay, can we get one more adjective to describe this young person, or potentially something that we're seeing in the image about her and her reading habits? Oh, and I'm seeing, okay, yes. So there's present enjoyment. Thank you, Pamela. And she's laying back, she's reclining. Very, very good. Um, that's okay. So for this person, Keith Yortzhoy is telling us the image here is describing linear reading. It is when we take a book, we read it from the beginning, a book or an article, and I'll be using those words interchangeably during this presentation. But linear reading is when we take a book or an article and we read it from beginning to end. And just like you've mentioned, we sit back, we're relaxed, we're enjoying in a quiet place with no distractions. And I love that you're mentioning that, Gloria, especially the no distractions. So this person is reading in a very ideal setting. But I think for a lot of us, the word relax, the word serene, the word peaceful, the word no distractions. That does not describe our college experience, right? Our college experience is a little bit more vibrant. It's a little bit more alive. And so what Keith Yortzhoy is telling us, especially if we have this idea that every single thing we get, every single book we have to read from beginning to end. One of the things that we want to dispel in this workshop is you can't read everything from beginning to end, right? You have a certain number of hours that you can devote to reading, to studying, and you're going to have to do all of your reading within those hours. And if you read every single article, every single reading that you have from beginning to end, you probably are not going to finish all of your reading assignments, right? And that's just the truth. And if you are reading like the young lady in that painting, you're relaxed. You're in a super quiet place that looks like you're gonna fall asleep any minute now. You're not gonna remember what you're going to read because most likely you will be falling asleep while you're reading. And if you're not recording what you're reading, you don't have notes that you can easily access to remember what it is that you're reading. And if you are not thinking about your reading and jotting things down, either thinking about your reading and starting to write your essay or thinking about your reading and taking notes, then when someone asks you, what did you read? Because you've been reading for the last 2 hours, you're not going to be able to tell them what it is that you're reading because you were not taking notes, right? Um, and thank you, and thank you, Leslie, for mentioning that even in the library, there's quiet spaces, but it's not always 100% quiet. So, we have this idea that it would be wonderful if we could just sit back and relax and had all the time in the world to do our reading. But in reality, that's not likely to happen. We don't have that time. So because we don't have that time, what is it that we can do, right? So we have another little image here that we need to analyze. And once again, with the chat feature, what do you see in this image? So what Keith Yortzhoy is telling us is that because we don't have time to sit back and read everything from beginning to end and take a lot of time doing that, we need to become a predatory reader. So here we're seeing, what is it that we are seeing? Um, and very specifically, you know, when it comes to this type of predator, like what is it that predators do, right? So what do predators do? And if we can add some adjectives or some verbs to the chat, um, that would be great. So here, yes, we have an image of a shark reading a little book, and Amber is absolutely right. Predators attack, right? So they have sharp teeth. Yes, yes, yes. I love it because they have the instruments to be able to attack, like Amber is mentioning to us, right? Anything else? What is it that predators do? Yes, yes, there is a certain degree of aggressiveness um, and to the attack, right? And it's very focused, right? Yeah, yes, I love it, Gloria. It looks like he's about to annotate, and definitely that's one of the things you want to do when you're reading. If you're reading without a pencil or a highlighter, or if you are reading off of your laptop without a way to make notes, you're reading. You are doing linear reading. You're not being a predatory reader. That's what Keith Yortoy would say. So thank you for those adjectives, for those verbs. Yes, in order to become a predatory reader, we need to be aggressive to the thing that we are reading. We need to be very focused. We need to attack the thing that we are reading. We need to make sure that we are always taking notes when we are reading. So this is a nice little segue to the idea here is that a predatory reader is going to consume a text and get what they need out of it, right? So a predatory reader is going to consume a text and get what they need out of it. If you have 20 pages to read, we don't want you to read from page 1 to page 20. We want you to be aggressive. We want you to attack. We want you to get what you need out of it. And sometimes that means only reading 2 to 3 pages. Sometimes, depending on how much how much time you have, that might mean that you only read a couple of paragraphs, right? But you might not know which pages or which paragraphs are the ones that you're going to need to read, the ones that you're going to have to attack, right? When it comes to your reading. And so let's talk about those tips, right? So we're going to begin the part of our presentation today when we're going to talk about these 6 strategies to become a predatory reader. So let's start with they're in no particular order. And if you prefer to do some after you've listened to this presentation, if you prefer to do number 6 first, that's perfectly fine, right? So in no particular order, but I do actually like number 1 as being one of the first things that we always do. So strategy number 1 is find the thesis by observing word choice. So in the chapters that you're going to be reading for school, in the journal articles that you're going to be reading, quite frankly, in the essays that you're going to be writing, there should be a thesis or a main idea, or there should be a reason why this piece of writing is created, right? An author is trying to give you information. So whatever word you want to use or whatever word your professor is using, that is like thesis or main idea, use it. The idea here is that that's the first thing you want to do. Whenever you're going to read a journal article or a chapter from a book, you want to find out, you want to attack what is the thesis. You want to find that first, right? So you're not going to start from beginning to end reading. You're going to find and you're going to attack that thing first. So when authors are writing a journal article, when authors are writing a chapter in a textbook, when you as the author are writing a paper, you have to have a main idea. Now, a lot of the times it might not look like this is happening, but authors actually are trying to help you out when they are writing their journal articles. And so when Letty and I were coming up with this presentation, one of the journal articles we selected as a starting off point for us was um, Angela Duckworth's article on grit, right? And so one of the things that we noticed is that at the very beginning in the introduction, Angela Duckworth and the other authors, they tell us their thesis 3 times. They say, in this article, we reiterate, we suggest, and our hypothesis is. So this article, if you see the little note in the bottom, this is over 20 pages long. Let's say you do not have time to read all 20 pages. If you only have time to read one thing, the one thing you should be reading is the thesis statement. Find out what the thesis is, because then you can say, oh, the main idea or the main purpose or the thesis of this article is that grit is essential to high achievement. That's what Angela Duckworth and everyone else who wrote this article is all about. That grit is going to be important for your success because they tell us this over and over and over again. And it doesn't feel good if you've been reading something for 3 hours and you still don't know what the thesis is because you've gotten so much information that everything gets jumbled up, right? So first thing, every time you get a journal article or a chapter, the first thing you should always do is find the thesis. Authors will help you out by actually telling you what the thesis is, because they're going to use words specifically. They're going to use verbs like argue, assert, believe, claim, emphasize, insist, observe, report, suggest. And when we were looking at this Angela Duckworth article, like all of these words just kept on popping up for Letty and for me. So for example, the sentence that they use in the article is, these findings suggest that the achievement of difficult goals entails the sustained and focused application of talent over time, right? So that's a sentence where they're clearly telling us that's what the purpose of this article is. So that if the only thing you know after attacking this article is the purpose or the main idea or the thesis of the article, then you're good. You're on a good setting. It's better than I've read for 2 hours and I still don't know what this is about, right? So remember, you want to be a predatory reader. That means you have a big thing, a big text to get through. You want to be attacking, like folks have said in the chat, you want to be attacking the thing that's going to give you the most bang for your buck. And that first thing is find out what the thesis is. And use these verbs for making a claim. Try to look for them, because the thesis is always going to be in the introduction. Sometimes it's even in the abstract. So it's going to be in the introduction, it's going to be in the abstract. And once you know what that is, it's going to help the reading become a lot easier, because you're always going to know what to target, right? Okay, so that's strategy number 1, is finding your thesis and using the word choices to find your thesis even faster. So strategy number 2, again, pick and choose the most important parts. So again, we have an article that's 20 pages long, 30 pages long. We have chapters that are 40 pages long. Potentially, we cannot read all of those pages. We need to figure out how to choose the most important parts. And what this is called is a multiple reading process. But the idea here is that you're looking at a text, you're looking at a journal article, you're looking at a chapter, and you're trying to see what is the most important thing that I need to read. So if you're looking at a journal article, the most important thing you have to read after finding the thesis is you're reading the abstract, you're reading the introduction, and you're reading the conclusion. So again, if this is a 25-page paper, you don't have time to read all of that, right? If you do, that's awesome. That's really good. But most of us don't. So if you don't have all the time to read that, what you're going to do is you're going to read the abstract, the introduction, and the conclusion. Find the thesis, read the abstract, the introduction, and the conclusion. That's going to help you understand what you're reading. If you have more time, then go into the paper a little bit more. Then you're going to read in terms of the you're going to read all of the headings of the paper. And then in terms of the paragraphs, you're going to read all the topic sentences. And if you realize, oh, actually, this does actually make a lot of sense, and I have more time than I thought, you're going to read the whole thing again, right? So a visual representation is that if we look at this as these little horizontal bars as representations of paragraphs and representations of an entire article, the salmon colored beginning paragraph and the salmon colored concluding paragraph, those two pinkish orange paragraphs, those are the introduction, the conclusion. You want to read those first. And then you want to read the topic sentence. So those are the bluish colored parts of the paragraphs. And if you have time, you want to read everything. And the great thing about this is that if you do have time, by the time you go in and you read everything, you will have read parts of this article 3 times. So with the repetition, it'll be easier for you to understand the article. And because of the repetition, you will have more opportunity to help you remember the article, right? So again, we have a finite number of hours that we need to read. We need to be very mindful of what is it that we're going to read. It's the thesis, and then we're going to read the abstract, the introduction, the conclusion. Now, chapters also have introductions and conclusions. So those might be things in a chapter that you'd want to read first so that you can get yourself situated as to what are you going to be reading for the next hour or so, right? Okay, so let's go into section 3, strategy number 3, which is change your reading speed for improved comprehension. So we're going to go ahead and look at this image again. And again, each of the little sections represents a paragraph. So the orangey colored part, that represents a paragraph. And at the beginning of a paragraph, you usually have something called the main idea or the topic sentence, right? It's the concept here is that the first sentence or maybe the first 2 sentences, that's the whole point of the paragraph, right? The crucial information that you need to attack is there. Everything else in the blue, right? So in this image, the paragraph has the orange section and the blue section. Everything in the blue, those are sentences that are going to support your main ideas or your topic sentences, right? So if you can read and understand what those main idea sentences are, you can skip from main idea to main idea to main idea. And you're reducing the number of words that you're having to read, but not reducing your comprehension. You're still you're still understanding everything, right? And the idea here behind adjusting the speed with which you're going to read something is coming is illustrated in the graphic, but also on the paragraph on the side, right? So we have a paragraph that says slow down when reading the first sentence of each paragraph. That's my topic sentence. That's my main idea. Topic sentences tend to focus on the main idea of a paragraph. Don't miss the main idea by reading the entire paragraph at the same speed. This tip comes from Paul Nowak's Learning Study Skills course in LinkedIn Learning. He says maybe 80% of the time or more, the first sentence is the main idea of the paragraph. So it's important to slow down here to make sure you don't miss that important sentence. So if we dissect this paragraph on the left-hand side in the orange box, the most important idea is the first sentence. Slow down when reading the first sentence of each paragraph. That's what's going to tell you what to do. What the whole purpose of this paragraph is there in that first sentence. Every single sentence there is proof of why you should do what I'm saying in sentence number 1, right? So now that you know how a paragraph is constructed, and actually, if you take a look at your own paragraphs that you write, you'll see that your topic sentence, your first two sentences, depending on how much information you need to give, those are your main ideas. All of the other sentences are the backup to those first main ideas. So if you're trying to read something quickly, you don't care about the backup. You already trust that your professor asked you to read this article and that it's a legitimate article. So you don't need all of this other extra information. You want to get to the most important information. You want to attack that first. That's by reading the main idea. Again, if you have more time, feel free to go back in, because if someone says, well, why should I do that? That's where you have that information. But if the whole point is to try to get to the main idea, what is this article about? So I can talk about it in class, or so that I can answer my homework assignment or my test question later on, that would be what you want to read more slowly, more closely. And then everything else you can read a little bit faster. So you can just speed read through those parts, right? Because your topic sentence is going to be the most important. Um, so let's go ahead and shift over to another big thing that we've been talking about from the very beginning here in this presentation is annotating, or in other words, taking notes, right? So all of us are hopefully taking notes while we're in class. The same thing applies when we're taking notes, when we're reading a journal article, or when we're reading an assignment. So one of the best strategies after you figured out what's your thesis in this journal article, what's the main point in this chapter, once you've read, once you start to read the information in the journal, on the side you want to start taking notes. So here we have an image of one of our tutors who lent us a photo of one of um, her annotated chapters. And so one of the things we even see here is that this is a reading they had to do week 2 of the semester. So that's even part of the notes. And in terms of the notes, you can do it on a separate piece of paper. You can write all over the paper that you're reading. You can write all over your chapter in your book. The idea here is that you read a section, and then on the side, in your own words, you write down what that section is about, right? So you read a paragraph, and in your own words, you write down, oh, in other words, this paragraph is about blah, 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 blah. And that's what you write down. You can, in order for notes as well, we as college students get exposed to so many new words. You might also want to go ahead and add some of the new words, and you might want to go ahead and add those new words and definitions in the paper as well, so that you can take notes for that, right? So on the margins, so on the sides, on the borders of your paper, you want to write down summaries or paraphrasing of what you're reading. So in other words, this reading says this. You might also want to go ahead and jot down you might also want to go ahead and jot down definitions, and maybe even your reactions of like, oh, I didn't actually know that this was happening, right? Those might be critical bits of information that you want to capture as well. A little note about highlighting, because you are seeing that this page is highlighted. The tip here is to read the paragraph first. So if you're at the point where you're reading the whole paragraph, read the paragraph first and then go in and highlight. So you read the paragraph first and then you decide what's the most important part in these 15 sentences, or in these 15 lines, what's the most important part? And only after you've read the paragraph do you know what the most important part is? Because when you start from the top, everything feels like it's important. But remember how a paragraph is created. The first 1 to 2 sentences are the topic sentences. Everything else is supporting it, right? For us, because we're learning, it may actually be that a sentence like, you know, 80% the of the time that there's a main idea into the topic sentence, that might actually be the most important sentence for us that we'll use to remember why we need to read the topic sentences. So it's okay if that's what you're highlighting, but you won't know that until you read the whole thing and you analyze what it is that you're reading, right? So it's okay to highlight, but use it sparingly and highlight afterwards. And you might want to highlight a phrase instead of an entire sentence or a word or two. If you are highlighting the entire thesis, of course, that's perfectly fine. And for a lot of us, we are not printing out all of our papers. We're not actually buying our textbooks. We have an e-copy of the textbook. So there is a PDF, Word or Adobe PDF that you can, when you're downloading things, you can make little notes on the side. And so this is a visual representation that our tutor created for us. And they were reading Keith Yortzhoy, Becoming a Predator Reader. And these are some of the key things that they wanted to go ahead and point out. The great thing about taking notes is that you have, for example, this page that maybe has 300 words. But if your notes are only 50 words, when you go back, you study those 50 words. You don't go back when you're studying for your test and reread the entire section, right? That's why the writing notes is so important. Okay, let's transition into section 5, and section 5 is more about writing notes, but specifically writing something called a concept map. And so Letty and I were talking about this, a couple of years ago when we were creating this workshop, because I learned this as a bubble map when I was in high school. Letty learned this as a concept map. The idea is that we are talking to the text, we are looking at what is this article, what is this chapter, what is it telling us, right? And I'm very, very happy that Letty was able to find a handout for us that's called Taking Effective Notes for Critical Reading by Dr. Ellen Moody from the University of Illinois. And on the Library Live webpage, you have access to these handouts. So what is a concept map? So the concept map is, again, a visualization, and I'm going to hop over to this slide first and then go back. So a concept map is just a visual, right? You have a chapter, you have an article, and you're creating a visual. What is this thing about? Right? So what's the main idea, right? So the concept map in the back, I would have normally called the bubble map, that has the thesis right in the middle, right? So you can't even start doing this bubble map or this concept map without knowing the thesis. So that's the first thing you have to hunt down as a predatory reader, right? And then all the other bubbles are, if this is the main idea, if this is a thesis, how is it supported? Right? What is the author saying to prove that that thesis is the right one, right? And so all of those things are on the side scattered about. And since you are the one writing the concept map, since you're the one creating the bubbles and filling the bubbles in, you get to decide and you get to interact a lot more with the reading, and that's going to help you understand the reading a lot more. So the concept map is this visual organization and representation of the knowledge that you're getting from your reading. You can also have keywords written on there, concepts, ideas, the evidence that the author is using, because you have arrows going one way or another, or lines going one way or another. It allows you to see the connection between things. It does provide a structure for how to take notes so that it's not one page after another of like stuff on the margin. It's an actual different piece of paper with all of the notes on your reading, right? And again, because of the way that you're organizing them, you get to see how all of the concepts are related, right? And if you're a more creative thinker, a visual thinker, this illustration is helping you see those links, right? So we have these examples of the concept map that are very traditional. If you're ever wondering, like, but I don't actually know what to write down. It's like I've seen concept maps before, I've seen bubble maps before, but I don't actually know what to write down. And so Letty has this the handout from Dr. Moody that actually has suggestions of what we should be looking for when we're going to write a concept map. And Letty, do you want to talk a little tiny bit about the some of the key words or the direction that Dr. Moody has for us? Okay, let me feel
Oh,
free. Yeah.
okay. Thank you. I was gonna say, keep your screen on, and I can definitely see it from here. And I was just thinking, wow, these are really good tips. And we've been kind of working on this workshop,
Mhm.
right, Iris, for a while. So all of the tips that we have for you, they're really effective. And one of the most important things that I think we've been emphasizing throughout the session is the importance of being able to identify the argument, like actually being able to, with your digital highlighter, your digital pen, or your real, physical pen, to put your pen on the actual part that says this paper argues XYZ, or the purpose of this chapter is to do this XYZ. So once you do that, that really is the core skill, because from there, what you can do is on the side of your annotation, you can do like I do. I always write the word argument right there, right where the argument is, so that when I'm rereading and studying for my exams, my eye visually goes back to that location. And then from the argument, if you follow or have the argument for what you're reading, the next thing that you really want to identify is like, how do they prove it? What's the evidence? What's the data that they use? And what do they say about the data that demonstrates the argument? And remember, most of these articles that you're going to be reading, unless they are literature reviews and they're not presenting an argument, they're just kind of reviewing what other scholars or academics or experts have written about a topic. If you're reading a literature review, that's what they're going to do, is kind of give you a summary of what scholars have been doing. But if you're reading a theoretical conceptual paper, or you're reading an empirical study where the scholars go out into the community and conduct a research, or the scientists go into the lab with a hypothesis and they do an experiment, those types of studies are always going to present the evidence.
Mhm.
And even the way that people write literature reviews, they make decisions about what literature to include and the order that they include it in. So even paying attention to the ways that they present the information is also part of that evidence kind of piece of it. So in the chat, I added a little note in there to distinguish between summarizing and synthesizing. And most of you are going to write a literature review, some in at least one of your classes, if not most of your classes. And what you want to do in the literature review is you want to synthesize the readings. So by breaking up each reading and finding the main argument and what they use as evidence to prove the main argument, and then perhaps a note that connects, like number 8, connects that reading to something that you're interested in or your project, making some sort of self-assessment, I agree with that argument or not. Once you have that for each of the articles, then what you want to do is put them in conversation. And that's where the concept map can really help you, because you can make bubbles for each of the readings that you're doing. And each of the bubbles can have your argument, evidence, and what do I think about it? Did they convince me? or some other assessment that you make of the reading. Once you have those little pieces, those building blocks, then your center part of the concept map could be an analysis that you make of it. Like you can say, this article is important because it talks about XYZ, and it's also important to read it alongside this other article because they make a similar argument. However, this other article or these other scholars bring up a completely different point and in fact challenge the things that author number one and author number two said. That's synthesis. So synthesis is putting them in conversation, and that's where the concept map can really help. I'll stop there.
Yeah. Thank you, Letty. And that's extremely important because very often you're going to be asked to talk about a number of things at the same time, right? A number of journal articles at the same time. So this is actually a photocopy of the article that we used, and we created these other concept maps. So these are just visuals for you to see that there was a real article that we were using as the backbone for this presentation, and that there are different ways of creating the concept map. We had the student versions that we showed you, but we also have these versions just as a visual representation of the concept map. But the idea that that Letty is talking about m- having one article talk to the other article, and for you as the author to really see those connections between articles, that brings us to point number 6 and the last one, which is make meaning from the reading, right? So what you want to very much do, and I wish that I could have like a time machine to go back in time because I didn't do this when I was a college student. And I felt like very much I was reading things and then taking a test and answering the questions and then forgetting these things, right? But what you want to do, what would be better use of your time, is to think about all the things that you're going to read as part of all of the body of knowledge that you're going to get. So if you have a chance, let's say you were going to read the Angela Duckworth article, learn something about the author before reading the article, right? So listen to one of her TED Talks, listen to her podcast, listen to an interview. And here I'm saying listen because it's a different type of way of getting knowledge, and it might be faster than reading, right? But it's easier for you to understand the Angela Duckworth article if you've heard her talk about the article before. So now when you're reading it, it's not a cold reading. You actually understand what her main ideas are about, right? Also, look at the articles, look at the chapters in relation to your syllabus. If this is something you're reading chapter 1, that might be an important theory that you're reading or you're being exposed to. You might have to reread that one. Not so much something that's happening later on, but you might want to remember the multiple reading process is figuring out what do I need to pay more close attention to. You might have to go back to something in chapter 1, right? Or something that was at the very beginning of the of your syllabus as a reading assignment. And then really to expand this, how is this reading going to connect to maybe your next class next semester, or potentially even your career? A lot of these things are going to be helpful for you as a college student. It's not just random knowledge that folks are asking you to get. And then ultimately, all of these readings are talking to each other, so use them as a conduit to talk with one another. Have study groups, right? Talk to your professor about the things that you're reading. So if you're shy about visiting them during office hours, use one of the readings as a catalyst to go talk to your professor. I've read this. This is what I understand. Is this accurate? Can you recommend other readings, right? So that you can go ahead and start integrating all of this reading into, your your life as an academic person, as a scholar, as a professional in your field. And then the reading comprehension would be easier because you understand how all these concepts fit together. Right. So you saw the book that we were using when we created this. We took a lot of other resources. This is our works cited page that we have here. Thank you so much for your participation. This gives us an opportunity to get together as a group. And speaking of about talking together, to talk to one another about this presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and stop share. And I know that some things were going on in the chat that I didn't get a chance to see. Um, so, so any quick questions as I read the chat?
I was just going to say, Iris, a lot of that chat was me, just adding a little bit more and also emphasizing all of the good points that you brought up. And students, if you would like the recording to the session, please feel free to drop your email into the chat. I will send you the link tomorrow morning. It takes Zoom some hours to process the link. And so by tomorrow morning, I'll have it ready. And if you put your email in the chat, I will send it to you. Iris, I actually wanted to ask a question while the students are maybe, brewing up some questions, and was wanting to ask if you could show again your screen on slide 16.
Okay, let me cue that up.
And the question that I have has to do with something that I tend to do a lot, is like sometimes I kind of go overboard with my highlighters.
Oops. Oh.
And like I have this little jar of highlighters, and sometimes as a treat to myself, if I like finish something, I'll say, okay, I'm gonna get some new highlighters. So I have tons of highlighters, and on slide 16, actually, I just wanted to.
Is it this one, or is it the one
Oh,
before?
it's a few more back, maybe like 4 more back. Yeah, this one or that or the other one.
Oh,
This one's fine.
Okay.
That one, actually, that one.
Okay.
Okay, so what I wanted to say is that this one was making me think about, all of the highlighters that I have and how I go overboard. And I was thinking about the strategy that you're pointing out here, and noting that the first sentence of each paragraph is going to contain the main point of that paragraph. And so if you're feeling, really swamped, and you're not sure, you're getting overwhelmed with the 30-page article, this is a really good strategy for you to use to find your like number one highlighter and use that to highlight and go through just the topic sentence, the first sentence of each paragraph. And I'll give you a story that happened to me this summer. So, as many of you know, I'm working on a degree as well. And this summer, my advisor, one of the things that she emphasized to me as I was going through my multiple drafts of my proposal, she said, you want to always start off each paragraph with like your main point. What's the main thing that you want to get across in this paragraph? You don't necessarily want to start your paragraph, and this is sort of like a writing tip now. You don't necessarily want to start your paragraph by summarizing somebody else's point. You want to identify like, what's the main thing I need to say in this paragraph? And that's going to go up at the top. And then you can follow up with, this point is also supported by other research done by so-and-so. They said this and that, but you want to emphasize your main point, your main claim, as the first paragraph. And then I was also thinking about this example when we were talking about the foundational text, or like those readings that you do want to read from page 1 to 30, or those books you do want to read all the chapters in. those are the foundational texts that your professors are going to give you. And usually you can tell that they're the main texts that really identify the disciplinary area. You can identify them because usually the professors will say, these are the core readings, or these are the required readings, as opposed to the suggested readings. And for those, you can kind of go more thoroughly and do a deeper dive and use a different highlighter. Once you've identified the main argument, use a different highlighter for, let's say, the data or the evidence that they use to support their main claim. So that's all I wanted to say about that slide. Are there any questions right now from the students? What would be a more effective, printing out of the article and highlight and annotate, or do them digitally? And I like the concept map too. You know, it kind of depends. One of the things I started doing this summer a lot is actually using the notes app, or like this little notes feature in the PDF. So when you download a PDF, and we all have access to PDF, Adobe, as students and also people that work at Cal State L.A., you can now use like this little notes feature on it. And that was very helpful for me because I then stored the notes and the PDF, like my PDF with the notes, I stored it in my RefWorks. And when I had to go back to do my own literature review, I kind of just worked from the notes that I had, because I had already more or less paraphrased those articles or those chapters with my own annotations. I was really, doing my paraphrasing in those notes. So, but some of us also, it's easier for us to like print it out and then actually write into. So you kind of have to find your own style. That's what I would say. You kind of have to find your own style, and you won't necessarily be able to print everything.
Yeah. I like what you're mentioning. You have to find your own style. It is more expensive to print everything out. But if the one key thing to keep in mind is whichever you do, either printing things out and taking notes, or reading something on the computer and taking notes in a notebook, or reading something on the computer and taking notes on Adobe PDF. Whatever you do, you want to make sure that you save the information in a way that you can access it later on, right? Because you don't want to have a file of a whole bunch of stuff saved on your computer, and when you need to access the notes, you can't find them, right? So that's a key thing. If you're going to go digital, find a filing system that works for you, right?
And sometimes the analog, like the old school way, is also like the more long lasting way. Sometimes keeping written notebooks can be more longer lasting. Yeah, but there's many, many tips, and you got to just make them your own. We've presented several for you, and we invite you to try them out. And the recording will be available on our Cal State L.A. Library YouTube channel. And if you have put your email into the chat, I will definitely email you the link tomorrow morning so you can go back and review all the tips that we shared today. And I think if there aren't any other questions, we can go ahead and conclude there. Yes, we have access to Adobe and other software. So I'm gonna put the link to that software in the chat in just a second. And then I'll go ahead and stop the recording. But I'll stop it after you take us out.
Okay.
Iris.
And thank you, Letty. I do want to say, as you're putting that information onto the chat, when you log on to your My Cal State L.A., that's where you will see opportunities to make appointments through Navigate LA for your advisor, for your writing tutor, for your math tutor. That's also where you'll find the access to Adobe Sign. That's also where you'll find access to LinkedIn Learning. And there's a lot of information on LinkedIn Learning of reading strategies and reading tips as well, right? So I hope folks have an opportunity to access that. The university is giving us a lot of things for free that we should definitely take advantage of. Thank you everyone for joining us today.